So today we're going to be looking at the Battle of Kosovo, and yeah, let's get to it, shall we?
However, even before Murad had secured his great victory in the region, the Sultan of the Ottomans would have to deal with rising tensions between himself and his Serbian vassals, who had accompanied him during the military campaign. During the aftermath of the short siege on Konya, Serbian troops under the Sultan's banner had begun looting civilian property within the city without the authorization of the Ottoman leadership. On his way back to Edirne, Murad would respond by executing the Serbian perpetrators responsible for the looting. Outraged with their brethren being executed by their foreign overlord, a vast majority of the Serbian vassal contingent within the Ottoman army would defect to Prince Lazar, who had by 1387 refused to give his yearly tribute to Edirne and started to form a large alliance of lower powers against Murad. Momentum would shift further into the Serbian prince's favour that same year, when he defeated and scattered an Ottoman raiding force of 20,000 during the decisive Battle of Plochnik, thus garnering even more support for an anti-Ottoman coalition in the region. With a Balkan prince openly defying him, and with the death of his much-trusted Grand Vizier during the same year, Murad would once again turn his gaze to the west, as he and his armies crossed into Europe during the late months of 1387. The Ottoman Sultan would first appoint Jandalizada Ali Pasha, the son of the former Grand Vizier, to his father's former post, before making military plans against Prince Lazar. By 1388, the Serbian prince had signed a peace treaty with Hungarian King Sigismund, thus securing his northern flank, and began consolidating his forces with the Serbian nobles of his realm and the neighbouring Kingdom of Bosnia, in addition to the Albanian Principality of Mazaka. Seeing that a powerful coalition was being formed against him, during the spring of 1388, Murad would launch a major two-pronged invasion deep into the Balkans. The first was aimed at Ivan Shishman of Bulgaria, who was said to be in the process of entering Lazar's coalition, and the second directly at Cvetko I of Bosnia in the hopes of dislodging him from his alliance with Serbia. Murad's Grand Vizier, Chandalizada Ali Pasha, would lead the first invasion. With his 30,000-strong host, he would pass over the Balkan mountains and descend into the northern Bulgarian plain in a swift surprise invasion. The Bulgarian Tsar, caught off guard by the sudden Ottoman attack, would flee from his capital city of Tarnovo to the more secure Danube fortress of Nicopolis, where he planned to coordinate his country's defences. However, the fierce and swift Ottoman invasion would surprise many Bulgarian garrisons in the region, causing many of them to surrender in droves, such as the garrisons of Cherven, Shumen, Venchan, Svishtov, and Ovech.
Yeah, what I find really interesting is that Murad, like I said, Lazar is essentially forming a coalition against the Ottomans, and Murad has taken the initiative, which, you know, we've seen like coalition battles in this channel. We're no strangers to it, such as, I guess the most prime example would be Napoleon, who fought a lot of coalitions. And one aspect of Napoleon that made him so successful was taking the initiative and being quicker than your enemy and catching them off guard, which Murad has had, you know, a similar response to, in that, okay, time to strike. And I think that gives him the advantage, and I think he is going to defeat this coalition. You know, that's my predicament, and he's going to be more aggressive, because Lazar got caught off guard before when he was getting power against the Ottomans, and the Ottomans, you know, essentially kind of forced his hand until he had to make a peace treaty just to catch a break, you know. So I think Murad's about to do it, and poor Bulgaria, that they're getting eaten right now. And yeah, it's gonna be cool to see kind of a more coalition war. I mean, you know, it's in the process of forming, but you know what I mean. It kind of does bring back memories, and Murad's response. Overall, Murad has just been a great ruler, I think. And in terms of both diplomacy and in war, he can do it all. Like, he's got all facets covered for great leadership, I see.
With large sections of eastern Bulgaria falling to Muslim rule, Ali Pasha's forces would next make their way towards the Danube River and the Black Sea, besieging the towns of Varna and Tutrakan. However, the Ottoman Grand Vizier would be unable to seize either city, as he lacks the men and materials to maintain a siege on the two well-fortified coastal towns. Turning westwards, Ali Pasha would march on the fortress town of Nicopolis, which Ivan Shishman presided over with the remnants of the Bulgarian military. However, after some time besieging the town, it became evident to Ali Pasha that he couldn't break through the defences of the Bulgarian Tsar with his current numbers, so he sent letters to Murad I for reinforcements from Edirne. Seeing that he was about to be gravely outnumbered, Ivan Shishman tried to bargain with the Ottoman Sultan to avoid losing all of his territories to the Muslim invaders. These negotiations were successful, and the Tsar relinquished the Danube fortress of Silistra to Murad in return for a cessation of all hostilities, the continuation of paying a yearly tribute to Edirne, and a promise he would not join Lazar's military coalition. After that, what remained of the Bulgarian realm was a petty collection of lands surrounding Tarnovo and Nicopolis, the Tsardom of Vidin to the west, and the Despotate of Dobruja to the east. With Bulgaria ceasing to be a threat on his northern flank, Murad would now turn his...
Again, like I said, like, Murad is handling this really well, essentially kind of stopping the enemy from completely unifying, because that's what Lazar was trying to do, get everyone to, you know, on the same page, and, you know, Murad took the initiative from that, and immediately got rid of a potential enemy with the Bulgarians, so again, just a great response.
Attention to his second planned invasion of the year, targeted at the Kingdom of Bosnia. During the summer of 1388, while Ali Pasha was commencing his invasion of Bulgaria, an Ottoman army of 18,000, led by the Rumelia Beyler Bey Lala Shahin Pasha, would spear through Serbian territories into the domains of Tvrtko I. However, this time the Christian defenders of the region were well prepared against the Muslim invaders, with the Grand Duke of Bosnia, Vlatko Vukovic, ambushing the forces of Shahin Pasha near the town of Belica, resulting in the utter destruction of the Ottoman host and the near death of the Ottoman Pasha himself.
Wow.
Despite the various costly defeats inflicted upon his forces in the Balkans, Murad I did not give up his imperialistic ambitions and made plans for a grand military campaign directed at Prince Lazar for the next campaigning season in 1389, which this time he would lead personally. Gathering up his local forces in the city of Plovdiv, Murad would send letters to his two sons, Shazadi Bayezid and Yekub, to muster their levies in Anatolia and meet their father in the Balkans. Throughout the spring of 1389, an Ottoman host of around 40,000 was formed in Plovdiv. Meanwhile, Lazar was not idle and began preparing for an eventual Ottoman invasion. With all his preparations for the campaign complete, Murad and his Grand Ottoman army would start their march to Serbia, first stopping in the lands of his Serbian vassals, the dominions of Marko Mjenjavcevic and Konstantin Dejanovic. Gathering up the remaining Christians who had not already defected to Lazar in these regions, Murad would then make his final march towards Pristina, a vital crossroads town located in the heart of the central Balkan Peninsula. In the wake of the Ottoman invasion, Prince Lazar had ordered the consolidation of his coalition forces in the Moravian Serbian capital of Kruševac. The majority of the Serbian prince's army was made up of military contingents from his holdings and the realm of his son-in-law Vuk Brankovic. In addition to his primary host, Lazar would also be accompanied by smaller contingents from Bosnia, Hungary, Albania, Wallachia, and even a small group of Knights Hospitallers. In the first weeks of June, the coalition army under Lazar would begin their march south to meet Murad's host with the intent of repelling the Ottoman invasion and perhaps starting a process of kicking the Ottomans out of Europe. On the 15th of June,
Holy crap. Okay. So Lazar, man, has assembled, you know, his coalition, or at least what he could, you know, and this is gonna be a great battle. Like, I don't know how big his army is, but he seems like ready to give battle to the Ottomans, who he just said have 40,000 men. So this is gonna be very grand, and I guess we'll see, because, you know, at least some of the Christians were somewhat ready for the invasion, but that was before Murad now has personally took charge, so we'll see. But I guess it could just come down to who's the better leader. At least, I don't know how well, unless Lazar is the head of the entire army and he's the one calling all the shots, we'll see what he's made of. But I'm also wondering if all his allies are all completely on the same page and there's no internal division, because if there is, that might play into the Ottomans. I don't know, I guess we'll see, but so far they seem unified under Lazar, so yeah.
1889, on a flat plain northwest of Pristina, the armies of Lazar and Murad would face and initiate one of the most significant battles in medieval European history. His foe had unexpectedly challenged him to a field battle, so Murad set up his
Holy crap, wait a minute. Lazar has artillery. Okay, I'm looking at the army compositions right now. I'm guessing these front lines are crossbowmen. At least this sign here, because they don't look like the traditional bow composition little symbol that kings in general usually uses. So I'm guessing these are crossbows, but obviously the infantry, the cavalry, and these I can't fully recognize at the second. But then we have the coalition army, which is cavalry, a straight line of cavalry followed by infantry, but it's the artillery that catches my eye. Like, again, like, I don't mean to glaze up artillery, but we know how OP artillery can be, especially if well utilized, right? Like, well utilized artillery can really, like, damage the enemy's ranks. And I know this is a little bit earlier than when artillery was more at its peak, like later on in history, you know, especially like near the Napoleonic era, where artillery was basically like, you know, you couldn't fight a battle without artillery. That would be like completely insane. This is a much earlier time, obviously, but again, like, I think artillery can be incredibly advantageous if utilized well, and I think depending on how Lazar uses it, it could be incredibly beneficial. But then again, I guess we'll see, because I don't know what Lazar is capable of as a military man. Obviously he's had success against the Ottomans, but he's facing the main guy now. He's facing Murad, who is a genius, as we know. So I don't know if Lazar is up to that level, but we will find out what his tactics and plans are for this.
Ottoman host in a defensive formation. On the Ottoman front line was a contingent of around 1,000 archers, encamped in defensive positions in between the...
Okay, sorry, I thought those were crossbows for a second. Sorry, the archer icon looked a bit different. Oh, well.
Two armies. Behind them stood the majority of the Ottoman host, the infantry, made out of primarily irregular light infantry units called Azebs, who were mainly recruited from Anatolia and armed with axes, maces, bows and poleaxes. Further in the back stood the Ottoman cavalry, mostly Akinji light cavalry and Tamali Sipahi heavy cavalry. Lastly was Murad's own personal guard, also known as the Kapikulu, made out of 2,000 elite janissaries and 500 Kapikulu Sipahi cavalry. Shehzadis Yaqub and Bayezid were respectively given commands on the left and right wings, while Murad and his Grand Vizier Jandalazade Ali Pasha commanded the Ottoman centre. Although Murad's army outnumbered Lazar's army by 40,000 to 30,000, the majority of the Serbian host was better equipped and armoured than their Ottoman counterparts. The strength of Lazar's army lay with his mounted knights and light archer cavalry, which made up the Serbian front line. Behind them were various contingents of infantry units formed out of Lazar's coalition members and his holdings. Lazar would command the Serbian center, while Bosnian Grand Duke Vlatko Vukovic and Vuk Brankovic were respectively given commands of the Serbian left and right wings. The battle would begin with a general charge of Ottoman Akinji light horsemen towards the flanks of Lazar's host. However, after unsuccessfully trying to harass individual enemy formations, the Akinjis would retreat to their original positions at the Ottoman rear. After repelling this initial Ottoman assault, Lazar would then make an attack of his own by ordering a general charge of his entire line in the hopes of overwhelming his foe with his numerically superior heavy cavalry. Prince Lazar himself and his fellow commanders on the Serbian wings would accompany this mass charge of mounted knights as hundreds of banners from across the Balkans filled the Kosovo field.
Okay, so Lazar's idea seems to be just break them through a cavalry charge. Yeah, I mean, definitely, like, he has mentioned that obviously the knights are better equipped, and obviously with such a heavy in terms of, like, just their strength, and I guess it is reasonable to assume they could break, but then again, I don't know. It seems like it's just a straight up frontal assault, and hoping we just break the enemy, unless the Ottomans prove true, which I'd imagine they would be able to hold, at least somewhat hold the line, right? They won't completely break, and then it's like, I don't know. I'm just looking at the artillery, I'm like, are you gonna use that? Are you gonna use your artillery advantage? Like I said, I know this is an earlier time for artillery, and I don't know how, I guess, powerful it was in this earlier time. I'm thinking obviously later on when artillery becomes beyond OP, but I do think, like, it definitely is something that shouldn't be ignored, but so far it seems like, I mean, that might just change in a second or two, but so far it seems like Lazar's not thinking about it, which I think is a mistake.
As Lazar's Serbian knights were making their way through the plains, Ottoman archers, from their defensive positions on the Ottoman front line, would send volleys of arrow fire into the ranks of the Serbian cavalry, perhaps as a way to dislodge their tight wedge formations before impact. However, this would inflict marginal damage, as the entire heavily armoured Serbian line violently crashed into Murad's army, resulting in heavy Ottoman casualties. Although Prince Lazar and Vlatko Vukovic both made ground pushing through Muslim lines, on the Serbian right, Vuk Brankovic made the most significant progress by pushing back Ottoman forces all the way into their war camp. At this critical junction, it seemed like the Ottoman left, commanded by Shahzada Yakub, was on the brink of total collapse, which would have allowed the Serbian coalition to fold up the entire Ottoman army. At this precise moment, historical sources and traditional Balkan folklore on the Battle of Kosovo begin to provide different accounts of the following events. According to Bosnian sources, written a couple of months after the battle, a group of 12 dismounted Serbian knights had managed to break through the crumbling Ottoman left wing before making their way to Murad's tent, killing the Ottoman Sultan in the process.
Whoa.
Before being hacked down by Murad's...
Whoa, holy crap. I was not ready for that. I was, like, ready for the Ottomans to, like, just completely counter push. I mean, that still could happen. But, oh my goodness.
Personal guard. Ottoman sources, meanwhile, also agree that the Sultan died, but describe his ultimate fate differently. According to them, the death of Murad occurred after the battle. As the Sultan was inspecting the dead on the battlefield, a knight who had been previously playing dead rushed towards the Ottoman ruler, fatally stabbing him in the heart. Serbian sources also state that the death of Murad occurred after the battle, claiming that a Serbian nobleman named Milos Obilic, sometimes cited as Lazar's son-in-law, wished for an audience with the Sultan in his tent to convert to Islam and surrender his arms. However, once entering the tent, the nobleman would draw out a hidden dagger and stab Murad in the chest before being killed by the Sultan's personal guard. Whichever one of these...
Either way, he's dead. I was not expecting that. I did not expect Murad to die. I thought Murad would was going to be one of those rulers who were just, he's so good. I mean, he is good at everything he was doing diplomatically and in terms of war, but I thought he was going to be one of those ones who kind of like live to die of a natural old age. So his death here completely has got me off guard, to put it nicely. I was not ready for him to die. Wow, I'm telling you, like, that's history, man. You can't predict stuff like that. It just happens randomly. No one has plot armor in real life. At least not for long.
His renditions of events was true, the result was the same. The Sultan of the Ottomans lay dead on the Kosovo field. Whether the Sultan was dead by this point in the battle or not, Vuk Branković's successful charge on the Ottoman left had begun to stall, as reinforcements from the back line had started trickling into the crumbling wing, thus stabilizing the Ottoman front line for the time being. As the initial Serbian charge lost momentum and thousands of men from both sides were bogged down in hand-to-hand combat, the tides would slowly shift in favor of the Ottomans. In a sudden counter-offensive with his Anatolian cavalry, Shahzadi Bayezid began to push back the overextended forces of Vlatko Vuković in a drive which would spiral into a large-scale Bosnian rout. With the Serbian left in a complete rout and Bayezid's forces converging on the Serbian center, uncertainty and dread began to ferment in the ranks of Prince Lazar's coalition. With the tides of the battle suddenly changing in favor of the Ottomans, Vuk Branković began conducting an organized withdrawal from the battlefield in a move to save the remaining troops under his command. Perhaps the Serbian nobleman wanted to conserve his forces to resist the Ottomans in the future. However, according to traditional Serbian folklore, it is stated that Branković had more sinister reasons to withdraw from the battle, as he wished to make a bid for the Serbian throne by secretly working with Murad. Whatever the case, whether...
No, Murad's dead. Oh man, I'm sad that artillery up there seemed to be completely ignored. It's just sitting there, but completely unutilized. But yeah.
Lazar intended to withdraw himself but could not, or his son-in-law betrayed him. The Serbian prince prepared to make a last stand, with the Ottoman forces now flooding down both his flanks. After hours of withstanding Ottoman attacks, the remaining Serbian army contingent had either been routed or killed. Lazar Hrebeljanović, the Serbian prince who had tried to reform the former Serbian Empire under his rule and had been a thorn in the Ottoman ambitions in the Balkans for years, was captured by Ottoman troops and beheaded. Sultan Murad I, the ruler responsible for the widely successful Ottoman conquests in the Balkans and Anatolia, was also dead. In his 18th century history on the decline and fall of Rome, Edward Gibbon recorded the following on Murad's 27-year reign. Osman gathered a race around him, Orhan turned it into a state, but it was Murad who established an empire. The Battle of Kosovo had been the bloodiest battle so far fought by the Ottoman state since its foundation. Even though the Ottomans had managed to wipe out the majority of the Serbian nobility and their prince in a single battle, it came at a high cost. A large portion of the Ottoman army had been killed, along with their sultan, during the battle. Now, the House of Osman's lands were susceptible to outside invasions from its hostile neighbors in the Balkans and Anatolia. According to...
Yeah, I have to give it to Lazar. He definitely wounded, I think, the Ottomans here. Maybe even if it is gonna be temporary, it still is a pretty big wound to kill frickin' Murad. Like, that's a huge loss. And managing to do as much damage as he did to the Ottoman army, like, it definitely... Yeah, the Ottomans won for sure, but definitely they came out wounded, which I think would make the rest of their enemies kind of look upon them like, oh, Murad's dead, and they you know, they suffered that much damage. Like, you know, it might increase boldness among their enemies, right? Like, maybe to jump on the Ottomans right now while they've lost such a great leader such as Murad. So they're probably gonna have to, like, quickly scramble and, like, assemble, get obviously a new leader, and, you know, reestablish their strength probably quicker.
To Ottoman sources, During the aftermath of the battle, a fatally wounded Murad had requested the audience of his son Bayezid to swiftly confirm the line of succession to the Ottoman throne. In front of the Grand Vizier and other Ottoman pashas and statesmen, the bedridden Murad proclaimed Bayezid as Sultan before passing away. After Murad's death, civil war became a possibility. The former Sultan's younger son, Yaqub, was still uninformed of his father's death or the ascension of his older brother, since he was still pursuing the routing Serbian army. The pashas, who had experienced the Ottoman civil war of 1373, decided that all threats to Bayezid's claim were to be eliminated. Upon
So murder his brothers? We've seen this a lot in history and empires, like, sometimes you gotta kill even your own family to secure your line. That's what I'm imagining. He's probably gonna kill his brother?
Turning to the Ottoman camp, Shahzada Yaqub was called into Bayezid's tent and strangled to death by a group of executioners, thus continuing the
Fratricide was seen as a rational option by the Ottomans to prevent succession crises that might lead to a bloody civil war.
the Ottoman practice of fratricide. The reign of Bayezid I would begin with the withdrawal of the remnants of the Ottoman army back into friendly territory. The new Sultan of the Ottomans would first visit the capital of Edirne to secure the Ottoman throne, before visiting Bursa to bury his late father and brother. While in Europe, the Battle of Kosovo was seen as a victory for Christendom over the invading armies of Islam, as the Ottoman invasion was repelled, and the death of Sultan Murad I was celebrated in many European capitals.
The Battle of Kosovo is still being celebrated by today's Serbian people as a national and religion. Oh, wow. I can see, yeah, it definitely, like I said, like, Lazar definitely gave the Ottomans quite the wound there. Like, they may have won, but they did not win easily. I mean, like I said, losing Murad is a huge L, any way you look at it. Though we'll see, Bayezid may just be amazing too, but still, losing Murad is a loss, any way you look at it. And in a sense, yeah, the Ottomans aren't completely expanding so far, due to all that, so I could see why Christendom probably looked at this, was like, I see this as a win in my book, you know? Yeah, that makes sense.
However, the reality on the ground was much different, as Moravian Serbia was now in a state where it could not resist its foes on the battlefield anymore, due to the losses in manpower it had endured during the aftermath of the battle. The late prince's son, the 12-year-old Stefan Lazarevic, would succeed his father during the days after the battle, with his mother, Princess Milica, becoming regent for the minor prince until he was of age to rule independently. While there was a transfer in power in the Moravian capital of Kruševac, the Serbian state under the young prince became ever so surrounded by enemies on all sides. Bosnian King Tvrtko I, now seeing his alliance with Serbia reaching its maximum practicality after the Ottoman withdrawal from Kosovo, had begun planning to seize Serbian lands, to truly become the King of Serbia, a title which he took back in 1377. Meanwhile, Vuk Brankovic, having preserved the majority of his troops from Kosovo, had allied himself with Hungary to make a bid for the Serbian throne. Lastly, it was still unknown whether Bayezid would conduct a military campaign of revenge for his father's death.
Holy crap. Yeah, that sucks for Moravia, Serbia, because now everyone is setting their eyes on taking them now that they're weakened. That's so insane. And friggin' a 12-year-old ain't gonna make the right decisions to handle this. Granted, like, his mom is more in control, but you know what I mean. Like, yeah, we're probably gonna see the end of Moravia, Serbia, right? Just like as it gets eaten and reduced. Like, even if it exists, it'll probably be in a more reduced state, so yeah.
In the following months. During the fall of 1389, the first action against Moravian Serbia was taken, with the Hungarian invasion of the Principality, resulting in the fall of many border fortresses in the region, such as Buraj and Chestin. Lacking any options to repel the northern invasion, Princess Milica submitted to Ottoman vassalage in 1390, to protect what remained of her once large Serbian realm. In addition to paying a yearly tribute to Edirne, the youngest daughter of the former Serbian prince, Princess Olivera Lazarevic, would be sent to Bayezid's harem to marry the Ottoman Sultan. By the summer of 1390, the Hungarian invasion would be repelled by local Ottoman detachments sent to the region. All of the border fortresses that had fallen to Hungary the previous year were retaken. Even though Vuk Brankovic still resisted Ottoman rule, and the rule of his brother-in-law Stefan Lazarevic in Kruševac, the year 1390 would mark the beginning of more than 470 years of Ottoman influence in Serbia. The battle...
Yeah, that sucks. Because Moravia, Serbia was kind of like the main enemy, right, of the Ottomans, or trying to challenge them in the Balkans, and now has been reduced to just a state, an Ottoman vassal. That sucks, but like, I guess just to keep existing, because Hungary, Bosnia probably would have just devoured it, so just to keep existing, but man.
of Kosovo is an integral part of the story of the rise of the Ottoman Empire. With the submission of the most formidable state in the Balkans, the Ottoman state was now able to expand its domains throughout the local region and beyond freely. Kosovo would also be an integral part of the story of Serbian national identity, which arose during the 19th century, as the battle is depicted in Serbian nationalistic circles as the end of a heroic, colourful golden age and the beginning of centuries of oppression and slavery under the Ottoman yoke. With the deaths of Sultan Murad I and Prince Lazar, and the destruction of Serbian autonomy after the Battle of Kosovo, a new age started in the Balkans.
So I'm gonna end the video right here, guys, and we'll watch some more tomorrow. Bye, everyone.